Larry, let's start with SpaceX. Okay, they fired their, filed, excuse me, their prospectus. What was that process like, and what does the timeline look like for a company going public, especially a company that's this big?
The process is pretty significant. They need to go talk with the SEC. They have to put out all of their S1 and their information that goes back and forth with the SEC a number of times, and there are delays like 30-day delays, and you updating something, them getting back to you. Then it's kind of a recursive process. It's kind of not easy, and and it's gotten harder over time, and that's one of the challenges, and why, to a certain extent, folks are challenged going public these days.
Why has it gotten harder?
Well, in trying to do the right thing, I think we've raised the bar on companies going public to a very large extent. You look at Enron and Sarbanes-Oxley that came out of Enron, and now all of a sudden, if anything goes wrong in any of your companies, the CEO is directly responsible. There's a lot of disclosure issues. There are a number of issues around liability. So there are law firms that basically buy a couple of shares of stock, and all you need is a 2,000 share holding to then start a class action lawsuit. And so if anything goes wrong with the IPO, or anything goes wrong with any type of disclosure, you've got law firms jumping on the bandwagon to file lawsuits, and it just becomes very problematic for the company. And hopefully the SEC, the SEC does know this, and the chairman of the SEC, Paul Atkins, is trying to do his best to try to solve some of these issues.
Yes, he hasn't been shy about saying he wants to ease this process along. You mentioned how recursive it can
be.
Make
IPOs great again.
Yes, make IPOs great again. I want to ask you how the exchanges are approaching this. So I saw the New York Stock Exchange kind of licking its wounds after all of this, but could you speak to the level of competition that's involved on the exchange size here? Obviously, each of the U.S. exchanges wants to get a piece of this here. They're fighting over these listings. What is the differentiating factor here? And I saw the New York Stock Exchange crying foul here, that they think that maybe NASDAQ got this in some sort of quasi-untoward way.
The process is pretty competitive, and honestly, there's not a whole lot of difference between going public on New York or NASDAQ these days. You either want to align yourself with the 200-plus-year-old New York Stock Exchange or the more tech-modern NASDAQ in Times Square, both of which give you marketing dollars and kind of promotional benefits. That said, there is a new stock exchange that's cropping up in Texas, the Texas Stock Exchange, that's trying to actually do something to make it significantly different to go public, but they haven't even launched, and creating a new exchange is not the easiest thing in the world, but they're trying to play around with, or they're working with the Texas legislature to change the rules to make it actually easier for companies to go public.
I do want to ask you about the valuations of some of these IPOs. All right, you've got SpaceX valuation up to $2 trillion, and then coming on the back of that, OpenAI may be eyeing a September IPO with a valuation of about $1 trillion. Someone was poking fun at this online and said, that's worth more than all the land in Australia. Sure, it's fine. Just keep buying it. Just keep buying it. Is there a concern that these valuations are not realistic?
Yeah, I can't really talk to the extent of realistic or non-realistic, but they're awfully, awfully high. If you look at NVIDIA, which is now worth over $5 trillion, that went public at south of $1 billion. So who's making this money? You look at Apple went public for like less than $2 billion. Microsoft less than $1 billion. These are multi-trillion-dollar companies now, and who's and general investors and people with pensions and people with money in the SPY and S&P 500 funds all have profited in the gain of these shares, whereas now all of a sudden you've got SpaceX looking at $2 trillion IPO. I'm sure there are individuals that have some stock, but not a whole lot. It's mostly Elon, the employees, some early investors. They certainly haven't been the majority of individuals. And the other, if you look at the companies that have gone public, the top, the companies that, the companies worth $1 trillion, most of which have gone public for under 100 billion. Most of them have gone public for under 10 billion. And all that return has gone to you and I and folks with, 401ks and IRAs.
Larry,
and now all of a sudden, if all of a sudden now SpaceX, there's no way that SpaceX can make the same kind of return as NVIDIA or Google, because they'd have to swallow the GDP of the globe just to get there.
Larry, thank you very much. Larry Tabb giving us that intro there, that preview of what's to come here in terms of these IPOs. And I did see this note from Michael Hartnett at Bank of America, wondering about the prospect of these mega valuations here. That's going to change the makeup of the S&P 500, further the concentration that we've seen.